I'm a scientist, and today I wanted to talk to you about problem solving, the kind of problem solving that I do all the time in my field of research. And if you couldn't tell, I'm an entomologist. I work with insects. So this is the kind of insect display that you might be familiar seeing in a museum. It's a big drawer full of pinned and dried insects. And that can be great for showing where insects came from with their label data, how they differ from one another. But I do things a little differently to some other scientists. I like to go to classrooms and visit with students, and I want insects that are mounted so that people can hold them, get up really close and personal with them. And so that was a problem that I discovered I needed to solve. This is the kind of insect display that you might be familiar seeing in a museum. It's a big drawer full of pinned and dried insects. It's really useful for storing lots of insects, for displaying where a group of insects have come from, how they differ from one another, but it's pretty hard to carry around. And I like to take my insects out on the road so that people like you can see them up close and in person. Also, this drawer and some of these professional display boxes are really expensive. So I had two challenges that I needed solutions to. One of the first things I started doing was looking out for any other kind of object that I could find at the supermarket or at the tip shop that had a glass lid. So this is actually an incense box. I took the middle out, and so I was able to put my insect specimens in. Someone can pick this up now, have a really close look, and it was $2. This is a glass picture frame, just with a little bit of extra depth. Sometimes you can find them at homemaker stores. And after I got the hang of thinking outside of the box, I was able to find all sorts of things to put my insects in almost for free. This is a grasshopper from Kings Canyon in the Northern Territory, and it is inside one of those little boxes that you get chocolates in at weddings. And I'm pretty sure that this was for putting cheese under. And now it's got one of my favorite clown beetles from White Sands Desert in New Mexico. So all sorts of things that you might find around your house or in the supermarket that you can put your nice collectibles on display in without having to pay all of the money and carrying all of the size and weight of a professional display box. I think this looks pretty professional. Another problem that I needed to solve, and every entomologist faces this problem, some specimens will dry and their exoskeleton, their hard shell on the outside, holds them rigid. Beetles, for instance, hold their shape really well, but soft specimens, like this weta from New Zealand, a giant cricket, have got soft abdomens, kind of like a spider, and they shrivel up like sultanas when they dry out. So to preserve this specimen, I actually had to taxidermy it like any of the animals that you might see in a museum. And taxidermying an insect is really, really hard work. I had 4 of these, and I didn't want to taxidermy all 4 of them. But luckily, I found another technique online, just like you'd find a YouTube tutorial for doing your hair or your makeup. And what I discovered is that you can wet mount specimens in hand sanitizer. Now, often we would store our specimens in ethanol. This is very, very pure alcohol, the same kind of alcohol that's present in beer or wine. And the same kind of alcohol that is present in hand sanitizer, only here it's very wet and runny. And you can see that the beetles in this jar aren't very easy to look at because they flop around in the liquid. But hand sanitizer has ethanol along with the gel to hold it in suspension. And that holds my insects in suspension too. Now, when I was thinking about problem solving demonstrations and things that you guys could follow along at home or in your classroom, I figure everyone has lots of hand sanitizer at the moment, so I thought we might have a go at making one of these ourselves. Awesome. So, to make a hand sanitizer mount, you're going to need a few things to hand. Firstly, some specimens. It can be hard to find insects in the winter, but you might have a dried out fly on your windowsill. I actually found these beetles quite recently because they gather around street lights or building lights. So if you're at the supermarket with your family late at night, have a quick snoop around. You might find something. Or you could use something completely different. I thought this pine cone might make an interesting mount as well. You're going to need hand sanitizer, and you want to make sure that it's quite thick so that it will hold your specimen up in the middle. And then you're going to need something for your specimen to go into. The ones that I used are actually DIY Christmas baubles from the dollar store. And because there's a hole in this lid, I used corks in mine. I had a quick scout around my house though to see other things that you might be able to get your hands on. Glass jars. This one's actually from a decorative candle. Some travel shampoo bottles. These are good because they're quite thin plastic, they won't break, but also very clear. And something that you can definitely go out and get today, I found these paint storage cups at Officeworks. So I've picked the beetle that I want to use and a pot for it to go in. I've put the pine cone in as well. I recommend pouring your hand sanitizer, not pumping it, because you might be able to see already, it's got quite a few bubbles in it. And depending on what you want your mount to look like, you might have to suck each one of those bubbles out again at the end. So the less we can put in there in the first place, the better. I want to do two things now. I want to cover my specimens in some hand sanitizer to kind of get them coated. And I'm going to put some into my permanent one as well. Let it pour in. Try not to make too many bubbles. And it can be quite full. We're actually going to want it to overflow before the end. You can use anything for this bit, even your finger, because it's hand sanitizer. And I'm just trying to get the gel in amongst all of the pieces of my specimens. So my beetle's nice and covered in hand sanitizer. There's a few bubbles in here. They can be kind of aesthetic. Now I'm going to turn my attention to this one. This is the one I want it to live in. So I've got a nice fine pipette. This will suck some of the bubbles out. This is a glass one. It's from my laboratory. It might be a little hard to find, but I know that you can find plastic ones out there, maybe even on eBay. And so you'll be able to persevere with these ones if you want all the bubbles removed. Push all the air out of my pipette and dunk it in, and I can actually suck in a few bubbles at a time. So I'm going to fish out my specimen, all coated in its own hand sanitizer, ready to go seamlessly into this one. And this is when we get to position it. And like I said, we actually want the hand sanitizer to overflow. That means that we won't introduce any bubbles when we put the lid on. Okay, so it's in. I think I'm pretty happy with how it's sitting. If I handed this to somebody in a classroom, they'd be able to see the underside and all around. So I'm ready to put the lid on. What I have found from experimenting with this in the past is that it's useful to have a bit of hand sanitizer in the lid already. I'm going to get those bubbles out so that they don't wind up in my mount. And then I'm going to squidge the two together. Hand sanitizer is going to go everywhere. It's easy to clean up. And it should stop any air from being introduced. You can see that hand sanitizer is going everywhere. I've got safety goggles on. My reading glasses count as that. And these are great because the lids seal really tightly and it means the hand sanitizer won't evaporate, even though this part is a little bit hard. So hopefully this has shown you how problem-solving skills, thinking outside of the box, applies to everyday life, even my everyday life, working in a laboratory with something so far out as insects, and how you could make an insect mount for yourself at home with the things that you already have to hand.